All stories need conflict. If Frodo could just waltz into Mordor and huck the One Ring into the fires of Mount Doom, then there would be no The Lord of the Rings. Video game narratives operate similarly, but their existence is necessitated by both storytelling beats and their design as games. What challenges protagonists, and by proxy players, between the title screen and the end credits? Sometimes it's the literal external forces standing in the way. Orcs of Middle-earth, Hyrule's moblins, or Bowser's Koopa Troopas. Other times, it's internal, a schism between beliefs and philosophies, or a battle against one's own mind and perspective. Conflict's primary purpose, no matter the form, no matter the medium, is simple: to add uncertainty as to whether a character's goal will ultimately be achieved. Conflict is what drives the Dead Space series in more varied ways than many other series I can consider. It approaches conflict in a number of concrete ways, but begs with each entry to frame those same forces a little differently. In the first entry, 2008's Dead Space, players control engineer Isaac Clarke. Isaac and a small team are responding to a communications blackout on the USG Ishimura, a large-scale mining and planet-cracking vessel in orbit over the planet Aegis 7. Isaac's girlfriend, Nicole, is working aboard the Ishimura, so Isaac has a personal stake in the mission. The routine operation quickly takes a turn for the worse as horrifying, twisted creatures called necromorphs attack and scatter the responding crew. With their arrival craft crash-landed into the Ishimura, the routine mission becomes a fight for survival, both against the might of the necromorphs and the indifference of space. As such, consider the main conflicts as against nature and against technology. As players learn from their own experience and various logs on the Ishimura, the necromorph invasion can be seen as a force of nature, propagated by the influence of the marker found on Aegis 7. More on the marker later. Kendra, one of the non-player characters in the game, describes the creatures as biorecombinators.
They take dead tissue, absorb it, and mold it into new forms. One iteration seems to have the sole purpose of infecting corpses. The others, well, seem to be making corpses to infect.
The necromorphs in Dead Space are an embodiment of nature the same way any animal in the wild is. They seek to survive, and to survive means propagation by whatever means. They are not malicious, necessarily, no matter what vibes the shrieking and the stabbing give off. They merely seek to exist. They are existing in the only way they know how, which, by their very nature, puts them in conflict with our protagonist. The necromorph seeks to multiply by making corpses to infect, so it strives to make a corpse out of Isaac. Isaac is in conflict with this. If he dies, then he experiences a notably horrible death and cannot help Nicole. Thus, he endeavors to survive so as to avoid pain, the core of the human experience, find Nicole and ensure her safety, and escape the vessel to live out his life. But the necromorphs do not have any moral quandaries about the pursuits of others. Screams and protests do nothing to deter them. They are an infection that seeks to spread, like a virus. They are either so far below people that they are truly so one-track minded as to only spread, or so far beyond people as to seek complete assimilation with other life forms. Neither is less terrifying to consider. The vacuum of space surrounding the USG Ishimura can be considered the ultimate force of nature. Asteroids, no gravity to tether us, no oxygen outside our bubble of breathable air constantly threatening to burst. All things that simply are, but are also a massive threat to human survival. Space simply was not designed with people in mind. Most of the Dead Space experience is trying to escape this bubble in the middle of space and try to keep it from popping in the meantime. Prevent asteroids from shredding the hull, ensure clean oxygen can filter throughout the ship, open up a communications relay for an SOS broadcast. The necromorphs can be seen as the primary short-term source of conflict, what with their bladed limbs and penchant for running at you all willy-nilly, but the threat of space, the overall need to survive within it, is the long-term conflict. You could be the most crack-shot space engineer this side of the cosmos, but you can't shoot your way out of a vacuum. Space is a different beast of nature. Whereas humanity has adapted and come up with ways and methods to survive, at least for a time, in almost every earthen biome, from harsh deserts to dense forests, space just is. Without advanced tools and equipment, it is physically impossible for a human to live for very long in space. The threat here is not simply death, but the absence of safety. Shelter can be constructed in the wild, but not on an isolated bubble in space. The shelter is already constructed and launched, and nothing can help you if it buckles too far against the indifference of space. On either side of Dead Space's conflict pendulum lie the natural, dangerous, frenetic necromorphs on one side, and the cold, empty vacuum of space on the other. In the middle, swinging back and forth between those polarities, is the conflict with technology. Consider the USG Ishimura again, that bubble within the vastness of space. While it is threatened by complete destruction and breakdown multiple times, what's fascinating is watching its small-scale breakdowns as a result of technology, both as designed and as its systems break down. For example, the vessel uses gravity panels to maintain the artificial gravity in space. As the necromorph invasion spreads, those elements of the ship start failing, and all parties, human and necromorph alike, can accidentally walk into a malfunctioning panel and be violently thrown into the ceiling. A simple feature that gives the crew a sense of mundane normalcy becomes one of its most dangerous elements when tampered with. In this sense, the vessel becomes more unregulated. Technology is still doing something by its design, but it now comes into conflict with Isaac's survival. Famously in the player experience, the USG Ishimura is equipped with quarantine lockdown sequences. When certain rooms in the ship detect foreign matter, like necromorphs, they go into a total lockdown until the issue is addressed and disposed of. This naturally locks players in a confined space with waves of necromorphs bearing down on them from all angles, sirens blaring and alarm lights flashing. While an effective feature in theory, the very feature designed to keep people safe ends up doing the most potentially fatal harm. No matter how many times I play Dead Space, I always end up feeling most tense in locked room situations. A fatal flaw of the ship's design, and that which puts me in direct conflict with technology. Science and technology also pave the way for necromorph-based issues. The recurring antagonist, Dr. Chalice Mercer, has been researching the necromorphs and created one of his very own, the Hunter, a marriage of the horrifying natural when prodded with just enough unfettered science. While exceedingly strong on its own, the Hunter's main boon is its ability to regenerate lost limbs. After being instructed to cut off the limbs of necromorphs all game, the Hunter throws a massive wrench into the tried and true method of survival. It takes unconventional methods to slow the Hunter even temporarily, and an entire point-blank shuttle rocket to finally kill it. The rescue ship encountered in the later chapters, the USM Valor, is chock full of shock troopers, all outfitted with in-suit stasis modules. Stasis modules in-game allow for users to produce small-scale time dilations, forcing objects and organic creatures to move at a decelerated rate from the user's perspective for an amount of time. When the necromorphs assimilated into the shock troopers, they assimilated with the stasis modules, granting them the perspective of everything moving at a decelerated pace. From Isaac's perspective, they fly around the room and rush him at breakneck speed, making the horrifying necromorphs magnitudes more terrifying. Technology, for all that it's designed to make human living easier and more efficient, is at some of its narrative best when its design goes awry, when it's used in some unexpected and terrifying way, or perhaps when it does exactly what it was designed to do all along. Horror games excel by making players feel trapped with their horror elements, be it due to infrastructure, you're in a building and you can't escape, geography, you're in the middle of nowhere so the only way out is through, or circumstance, my lover is trapped and needs saving and I can't leave without them. Dead Space somehow capitalizes on all three of those, all at once, all throughout the experience. Isaac's struggle revolves around being trapped in and trying to survive in a hostile world against hostile creatures, all while trying to make that hostile world more survivable, even just for a little while. But something always snowballs and goes wrong. More necromorphs show up after he's killed a bunch. Another system on the Ishimura is failing. Isaac is in a constant state of slapping bandages on various problems, unable to get the ship operational long term. His lot is to maintain some level of control over the uncontrollable, putting him in direct conflict with nature and technology throughout. Given the circumstances, the USG Ishimura is going to keep breaking down. Even if Isaac flushes out one major problem, another will crop up in time. Everything that Isaac encounters took a mere 48 hours to manifest, and he is but one person in a massive vessel. Systems were bound to continue failing, if only for the sheer rate of reproduction the necromorphs are capable of. Complete breakdown was inevitable, if not for Isaac ultimately escaping the doomed craft. On the necromorph side, there is no reasoning with or controlling the necromorphs at this stage. They are single-minded and are far beyond or well beneath the needs of humanity. It twists and corrupts what humans have normalized physically and mentally alike, scarring and destroying people both directly and psychologically. The necromorph organism is a force of nature, plain and simple. Thinking that anyone is capable of stopping, containing, or controlling nature in the long term is a fool's errand. Nature always wins out because nature simply is. If it can't overcome its obstacle, it can always outlast it. And as finite as our human lives are individually and on the grand scale of existence, that might be the most terrifying thing of all. At the center of the Dead Space narrative is the Marker, a twisting structure chiseled with markings and glyphs completely alien in its design and language. The Marker is at the epicenter of the Unitology faith in human space, a religion that espouses tenets of transformation and rebirth, all while calling for the abandonment of reason and requiring unwavering faith from its followers. The Markers, according to Unitology, were the sacred catalyst that would reunify humanity with their divine alien creators after death. Objectively speaking, the Marker has the capacity to influence the minds of those around it to a great distance. Its effects could be felt throughout the surface colony on Aegis 7 and throughout the USG Ishimura when it was brought on board. On the surface, it triggered myriad responses in people. Some became highly depressed and began suffering from dementia and insomnia, while others grew manic and paranoid, performing gruesome acts of mutilation both to others and themselves, the first wave of preparation for new necromorph hosts. Dr. Mercer, a devout believer of Unitology, espouses the following.
Do not abandon your faith. What's happening on the colony is not a tragedy. It's God. Its truth is even more fantastic. On the planet below us, we have found a marker. God's plan is unfolding and we are its inheritors. We will ascend as we always knew we would. Unitology is truth, and your death is the first phase. Be deterred by the physical methods of transformation. Soon, you will be beyond any physical concerns. You must have faith, fools. This is what we have been searching for all these years. This is what we have been waiting for. Don't listen to them. Come back! Come back!
Others, like Isaac, would see images and hallucinations of loved ones guiding them towards specific actions or paths. All of those are terrifying in their own right, but perhaps the most terrifying is that the threat is not nearly as alien as we would want to believe. Again, from Kendra.
The Marker, this divine relic, made by man. They reverse engineered it a couple of hundred years ago from the real Marker, a true alien artifact recovered on Earth. They dug it up, studied it, and they made it their own. Then they brought it to Aegis 7. And activated it. And you've seen the result. The stuff of nightmares.
Research on the original Marker was with the intent to discover a source of renewable energy. Its intent may have been noble to begin with, but it quickly devolved into a thing of faith and fanaticism. People studied the Marker, created duplicates, and scattered them throughout space. All this after having seen the results of the Marker's influence, the necromorphs. In this case, the hubris of humanity is the source of natural conflict. Whether they pursued it out of scientific curiosity, a faith-driven crusade, or some unholy blend of the two, humanity's stance that they had a modicum of control over the marker proved to be their undoing on Aegis 7. Even though those same people may have been acting in accordance with the marker's influence, the marker knew how to influence them, how to make them think it was their idea, that it was a good idea. The marker operates far beyond human comprehension, a force of nature that sees humanity as a blip, a resource to be influenced and, in time, assimilated. The marker is a creation of technology, a man-made force of nature. Geomythology, according to the term's creator, Dorothy Vitaliano, is the study of the actual geologic origins of natural phenomena which were long explained in terms of myth and folklore. Man, Vitaliano continues in a separate study, has always sought to explain his natural environment. Natural earthen structures were given form by deities or giant animals. Lightning and thunderstorms were associated with thunderbirds and gods of thunder. A giant catfish was responsible for earthquakes. Perceiving the natural as divine traces back as far as humanity has believed in higher powers. But science has shown across the board that there are logical explanations for all of these things. Even the marker, even the necromorph contagion. Unitology explains the transformations as the process of unification of life after death, but it's far simpler than that. It's just the natural order at work. The marker seeks to spread its influence, and so it does. Necromorphs seek to make more of themselves, and so they do. The most devout unitologists believe this to be the way to salvation, and so they perpetuate the process. Perhaps most telling, though, is humanity's perspective on nature as a source of conflict to begin with. If it stands against humanity, even passively, it is opposition. When a hurricane crashes inland, when a natural fire rages out of control, when an earthquake rocks an area, it's a hazard. It simply is. It only becomes a disaster when a natural hazard meets a human population. Thinking long-term, nature is unstoppable. It is a force that can outlast anything that stands against it, capitalizing on the one thing humans in particular lack: time. Even if Isaac succeeds on the Ishimura and Aegis 7, even if he stops this onslaught, prevents additional destruction here, there are still other markers in the universe. They will wait. The marker and the necromorph contagion only became an issue because there were humans around to tamper with it. No humans, no hosts to influence and infect, no necromorphs. But perhaps it always knew in some deep, old way. For as long as it was buried underneath the earth, something would eventually evolve to try and comprehend it. And so it waited, simply because it could. That is the core of conflict with nature, and that is why Dead Space is as terrifying as it is. Because it's a battle that we may win, but it's a war we will always ultimately lose. Conflicts with both nature and technology are integral to the story in its first installment and in the rest of the series, but once they're established, they can take a back seat to other, more personal forms of conflict. Next, in Dead Space 2, we join Isaac as he grapples with a system that made him and now wants him dead, and, most importantly, Nicole's fate and how that affects him. We'll drill into Isaac more personally than before and explore conflict with society and conflict with self.